For the AP test, choose what you want to do.
You want to do it?
Let's get ready for the AP.
Good call.
We don't really have much to discuss now about campus cuisine number 2.
We have one more.
We just have production.
So what I would like to do is get ready for the test. If you did extra credit number 4, you must assemble with a staple the outlines, your written grade sheet response, and the slip with your name on it. Then you can turn that all into the box up front. What?
I didn't know you were supposed to put an outline. I have it, but I have
You have until the end of P6.
Okay.
All assembled together with your name on everything inside the blue box. Also grab extra credit number 5 by the black hoses if you want to do more extra credit this weekend. Please read extra credit number 5 and put it on your head when you read it. Please put extra credit number 5 on your head when you read it. If anybody sees Daisy when she gets back, make sure you're gentle with her. Make sure she doesn't lift anything heavy. She had her appendix removed.
Been there, done that.
You been there?
Yeah.
Was it glorious?
It was really not bad. They said I needed to take tons of pain medication, but I was up and running in like days.
So you got pain meds for sale is what you're saying?
Basically. No, I didn't take it. Easy.
Hook it up, bro.
No pain. This is like it's from like 7th grade, dude. Not
Hook up the meds. They never go bad. Gabby Act?
If you studied a lot this week for the AP test, would that also count towards this?
No.
This is only for the studying you do over the weekend. So, I don't know if you all see what I have very carefully been orchestrating. I forced you to look through your notes. I forced you to look through the release stuff. Then I gave you even more credit to look through the release stuff. Then I forced you to study for the final, which was yesterday. And everything you've done so far already got points. And the script that my TAs use when they talk to your parents makes that really clear. When my TAs talk to your parents, they'll say, oh, did they do all this, did they do all that, did they do all this? Great, because all that already got credit. Now, between Friday at 3 p.m. and Monday morning when they left the house, how much did they study? Everybody understand what I'm saying? All the work you already did, good. If that already helped you and you don't need to study, great. But we're only going to pay you for extra study you do once you get home today. Yeah?
Are they, you said they were going to call in the next couple weeks, but are they going to call sooner than that? Because my parents aren't going to remember.
They probably will start calling in the next week or two, but I hope that your parents can remember.
Okay.
How busy are your parents really?
Very?
Sarah? I don't know. She lives at our house, really? She might have studied. I don't know. Does she really? I'm supposed to know that? I don't keep track of my kids. Okay. Are there any questions about extra credit number 5? then first of all, I'm going to leave this running on a loop. Don't be distracted. It will loop about 6 times in the period. But here are some common errors that students make. First, about taking the test, like students forget to guess, and students forget to show their work, and some students think that they're like applying for a job at Greenpeace, and students forget to give what type of cost and benefit, like economic or environmental, and they don't elaborate enough because they think they're talking to a genius instead of talking to a child. Anyway, I'm going to leave this looping. You'll see this numerous times, and you should have this whole slideshow or a slightly older version of this on your CD that you bought. Next. Next. Remember the amount of hours that you would need to study to get which grade. The amount that you normally do for a usual exam, you have to study 10 times more than that to follow the blue line from your average score to your predicted AP test score. And I had this on the board recently when a few of my old students came in and they were like, oh yeah, you were right. Like, it really does kind of work that way. You take your average score on a test, and if you study 10 times your normal studying, you'll get a 3 or a 4 or a 2 or whatever the blue line shows you. If you want to do better than that, you'll have to double that amount of studying for the green, and if you cut it in half, you'll probably ride the red line down. Don't forget, this isn't a promise. There's a lot of variation. Students have bad days. We have bad luck with the questions. All kinds of crap can happen, but this is just the amount of studying I usually recommend. Also, remember that your own notes are the most important thing. Smarty Pants guides could help. Other people's stuff might work. The book is probably a waste of time. Worst resource you have. Remember to lapse when you go through your notes. Cross out the stuff that you already know. Don't bother reading it if you already knew it. You are in period 2, so you'll be in the girls' gym. Unless you have College Board approved accommodations. If the College Board approved your accommodations, you'll go to the library's computer lab. You have to be there at 7:30. Watch. Some jerk is going to walk in at 8 o'clock, and then they're going to have to stop reading instructions to show that person where to put their backpack, how to prove that their phone is off, where to find their seat in the building, open their stuff, set up their desk right. When somebody walks in at 8, I'd like everybody in the room to boo for that. Because you're all going to be ready. And there's going to be Martin like, whatever, bro, it's 8:01. I'd like everybody to boo. Marlon, oh, or whatever. Or whoever walks in at 8. If you're not taking the test, I'll see you at the Career Center. So those of you who aren't taking the AP test, you can get an excuse, but we still have a class, like I'm still supposed to be supervising you from 9 to 10. So if you'd like to be marked present, I'll have to see you at the Career Center. If you want to know what to expect, 100 multiple choice, worth 60% of the test over 90 minutes, same order, same pacing as usual. And 40% for the free response questions, 90 minutes. This is roughly how we organize our tests, same amount of time and everything is pretty much the same as what you're used to. There'll be 4 questions, we'll talk about that later. Please look up. Everybody must have their own. Sharpened pencil. I highly recommend a good eraser. If you have one of these, you'll be stoked. These white polymer erasers, they leave no smudges on the Scantron. It's like the best spent like 79 cents of my college career right here. These are, no, I seriously have my college one. This was my university one. Like that got me through a triple major. That's what triple major looks like. Yeah, I don't erase much, but okay. You will need a ballpoint pen, blue or black. No like pink, glittery, green. If you want to use a gel pen, knock yourselves out, but that ink is kind of wet. So when you flip the pages, it'll kind of like smudge. They really do recommend ballpoints. And I know that ballpoints dry out sometimes, so you might want to splurge and spend 49 cents and like get a new one that you just take out for that one day. And one suggestion, just like, I don't know if you're new at writing, but you might want to get one that has like a broad line, like a thick pen. Because the really sharp ones have a tendency, by the time you get 3 or 4 pages down, to gouge the paper. I don't know if you've written in answer books before, but when you're like 4 or 5 pages down, all those little grooves that you've like ground into the paper make it more likely you can punch holes in it. So I'd recommend like a broad ballpoint or 3 in blue or black. If you're going to take a water bottle, it has to be clear plastic. There's like a whole thing about that, and students always get in her face like, that's not logical, so I'm not going to follow this rule. And then Hazel's like, we got to follow this rule. And everybody's like, oh, well, glass will work, right? And I guys are, nope, clear plastic. It's like, but I've got a metal one. Like, nope, clear plastic. So then all those students are like, what about like pink plastic? And the answer is no, clear plastic.
So this is not acceptable.
So that's not acceptable, and that's not acceptable.
One of the like, I don't know, the Scantron, she said it could be like, she said
Jay's like, oh, we know, I took this.
I have no horse in this race, and if I'm wrong, I'm glad to be wrong, because of course you'll have less hassles. But I have been told to tell you, and in the last like 5 or 6 years, they've progressively been strangling all the liberties out of these standardized tests, so every year they get more and more persnickety. You guys know that I run the SATs on campus, right? These are the SAT boxes. For me, like the amount of rigor, I get audited now. They like send narcs to my test center. So they'll be like, oh, we have like, you know, like secret shoppers, like they'll like see if you're like giving away the goods at the counter. Like we now get secret test takers.
Can I see my kids?
I mean, at the SATs we do, because there's people that come from other places. I don't know that they would on the AP test, because like, you don't go here. Like, that would probably, but we in the SATs, we get narcs.
kill the narc.
And so, seriously, we're all getting squeezed on this following the rules thing. So everybody's like, but you can see through it, it's clear blue. And like, I just been told to tell you that you need a clear bottle, and by the way, you can't have a label on it. Like, I know it's really hard to get your hands on a water bottle.
I mean, kinda. With not many rules around it, it's a little bit hard.
Yeah, they're called gas stations. You have all weekend. Get a water bottle, take the label off. Good luck with that.
That's 2 days.
Yeah, there's probably one. Yeah, right, yes.
Can the pencil be mechanical?
Oh, about mechanical pencils. My whole college career, I always used mechanical pencils. They always say it has to be like a... I believe that's because these are sharp and they punch through the paper. So if you can keep yourself from stabbing the paper, it's been my personal experience that mechanical pencils work. When I asked as the SAT person, they said, yes, we allow mechanical pencils. The problem is that they punch the Scantrons. I've never asked at the AP test, but they're both run by the College Board. So I think mechanical pencils are okay, but the fear is that they'll poke through. And there are different types of lead. So if you have a fairly generic mechanical pencil, you're probably okay. But if you have an architectural, like made for architects pencil, it might have that weird gray or dark or pure graphite lead that could be a problem.
Hazel was saying for like using mechanical pencils on the scan shop, so they have a different lead. So we should just like
Yeah, so what Hazel's referring to is that they might not have the right lead, and you can always play it safe and just take regular wooden pencils, like you know those are going to work. Okay, me again. We got to get all this crap out of the way, but I have much more specific stuff to prepare you for.
yeah, I see that.
You're not allowed to snack during the exam, but you're allowed to bring a snack for the break. No calculators, no phones. If I could please recommend that if you have a cell phone, you leave it in the car. I know a lot of you will have it on you anyway. Like, sometimes you'll just forget. Like, I've literally tried to walk onto a plane with my knife because I've had a knife in my pocket ever since I was, like, 12 years old. And so, like, I know that you could forget. You're all attached to your cell phones. But just so you know, if there is evidence of a cell phone on your person, like in your shoe, you're like, it doesn't have a battery, like, who cares? If there is a cell phone at your desk, on the ground or whatever, you may be dismissed from the exam. You can push it all you want. I don't care. I want you all to be happy. Do what you want. And make sure that you know which room you're going to. Are there any questions about what I said before? Okay, get ready. Sometimes students like to write things down during this part of the day. I don't really care. First of all, you all know that I did my master's on how knowledge goes into and comes out of the brain during testing.
You say you lied about that.
What?
You say you lied about that.
Which part?
Part about you actually knowing anything about how knowledge goes into your brain. You just read articles.
Oh yeah, I mean I didn't read like whole books, like cover to cover, but I did like take choice sections out of many books. And, you know, a lot of modern research probably does that way. But this is like a research paper, you know, a master's, you don't, yeah. Anyway. I can tell you a whole bunch of stuff about testing, because coincidentally, you may be shocked to hear this, but I was a fairly decent student. So I've got some advice about taking your test. There's three ways to get ready. One is all the stuff that you know. Two is what kind of head game you have walking in. And three is making sure that your body doesn't distract you. Ideally, you would walk in and comfortably, calmly dominate. So, number one, first and foremost, everybody must obey this. Don't stay up late studying. Don't use caffeine to force a longer night before. Don't cram. The single biggest predictor for your score overall, compared to your potential overall, is what you do in the night before the exam. And I've got a whole list of stuff to do and not do. Don't cram. Don't stay up late. Don't eat weird foods that you don't usually have. And don't cram caffeine. Also, don't use a screen in the last hour before bedtime. No cell phone, iPad, television, video gaming in the last hour before bedtime. What you should do in that hour before bedtime is light physical activity. You can all say whatever you want, like, I'm not here to debate with you, but not a single thing that I'm saying is absence of data. All of these things are all data driven. You want to go to sleep about an hour earlier than usual so that you get a really good night's sleep, and you're going to wake up a half hour earlier than usual too. So you want to go to bed an hour before your normal bedtime, after an hour of some sort of physical activity. Doesn't have to be extremely strenuous, but it should be continuous, and it's usually better if it's by yourself. I mean, okay. So you want like a 1 hour, like, go walk from your house to the closest beach and back, or take your dog to the park and throw the ball, or whatever you can do.
At like 8 o'clock.
To get a roughly 1 hour physicality session. It doesn't have to be peak intensity, but it should be roughly continuous. If you jog, go for a jog, whatever, do your thing. Get to bed an hour before normal. Wake up a half hour before normal. How many of you use caffeine in the morning? If you use caffeine, stay at your normal caffeine levels the morning of the AP test. Don't go cold turkey on the day of the AP test. Don't double it on the day of the AP test. It's actually apparently really important. Next, you want to focus on like a fairly decent breakfast. If you don't ever eat breakfast, you shouldn't start now, but if you do eat breakfast, you kind of want to have a quality breakfast. Protein and fat, and you definitely want to eat simple sugars on the way to the test. Like an orange or an apple or like some generic fruit that you can get. Whatever simple sugars fruit you can eat, you should be throwing away the apple core as you walk in. You want to be dressed comfortably? Like, let's call it like National Frumpy Day. On Monday, like no hoochie shorts that you're going to be like wrestling the wedgie all day. Like you want to just literally be in like cozy, comfortable attire. We're trying to remove all the distractions. We want your body to be at like a comfortable idle. You want your body to be just like not an issue. One last thing, it helps both with the physicality and to kickstart your brain. A quick little 10-minute low-intensity physicality, or even 5-minute high-intensive physicality before you walk into the testing room. Like, honestly, like, if you could like run a mile and then walk in, you can say whatever you want, but that's actually really good for you. It's a way that you can have like maximum oxygenation in your blood. You want to have really good solid circulation, and you want your body to be at rest. You don't want to have all this like twitch energy like built up. Like that'll all distract you. You don't want to be focusing on those sores because you slept in a weird position because you only slept 3 hours. You really want to walk in and like sink into your chair and like not have anything on your brain except domination of the exam. About that inspiration, you should kind of think of this as like a battle. You got to walk in ready to sweat it. When you sit down to that test, just so you know, you are an exceedingly well-prepared population of APES testers. The volume of content that's been shoveled in front of you is fairly robust. And That being said, you're not going to know about 10% of the exam. That's actually a lot better than many other kids. You should expect that. Don't freak out. Technically, roughly 50% of the exam still gets you a 3. You're not going to know 10%, so you're still going to come down 10% from your usual testing. And you could still pass. So don't stress. When there's stuff you don't know, don't panic. Be ready for that. If you walk into a fight, you should know you're going to catch a couple of bricks. That doesn't mean you're going to lose. Everybody got all that? Never second guess, but always do guess. Once you've guessed, move on. Chances are your subconscious knows exactly what's going on. When you think you're guessing, that's just the other part of your brain giving you the right information through an unusual network. You know when you run into somebody and you're like, man, I know it's, I'm just going to guess Kieran? Was it something like Kieran or something? Hook maybe? Like, yeah, that's actually my name. And like, oh, that's weird. I totally guessed that. Like, no, you didn't. You remembered. It just came to an unusual part. Yeah.
So since one of the free responses is math, what do you suggest we do if like we absolutely have no idea how to do it?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
On the multiple choice, you should skip around. Definitely skip around. What I tell all my students is, use the first 45 minutes to reach the end, no matter what. If there's anything that requires a lot of reading, or calculations you're not confident about, or that you really got to think to see if you remember the right details, just move on. At least half the free response questions, you should probably be able to answer at first glance. And if you get 95% of those right, that'll leave you 45 minutes where you just need 5 or 6 more questions to be on the winning side of the average. The point is, you want to skip everything that takes time and just pick off the low-hanging fruit. Remember, you only need about 50 or 60 as a universal average to pass. So pick off all the low-hanging fruit. If it looks kind of like, oh, I never did really well with that, like, oh, I suck at this, answer all the easy ones. Just like fill in the stuff that you know is casual. Then do a second pass to the stuff that like, okay, I probably, now I can sit down and read this. And if there's anything that's kind of like challenging or like really takes a lot of effort or a lot of thinking, leave those for dead last. If you're going through the free response section 3 times or 4 times, that's great. The inefficiency of moving the papers a little bit is easily offset by always producing answers. Kids get bogged down, they get stuck, and then they don't reach the end. That's really bad. When you got 5 minutes to go, if you've got just 3 or 4 left, read them and answer them. If you got 20 or 30 left, just bubble blindly. There's no guessing penalty. But if you can make an educated guess, it's always good. You should be working right to the end of the 90 minutes. As a very last resort, like the last 30 seconds, you can blindly bubble. Oh yeah, intense, bro. Intense. Are there any questions about the free response? Because you'll get a break. Okay, you'll get a little break. You have a little snack. Stretch a little bit. Shake it off. Don't stay seated. And then you move on to the, oh, no letter is more likely than the others. You don't just guess, like, don't guess C, yeah, don't only guess C or whatever. Can you imagine what a critical weakness that would be of a business of standardized testing? For some stupid reason to make a statistically more common answer? Like, there isn't. So you should guess the one that seems the most logical. Okay. So then you'll get to the free response questions. Please look up. The document-based question starts with reference to the document and then has stuff you didn't need to read the document. It's called synthesis evaluation, stuff you came in with. The math has the first half relevant to the math problem, and the second half is just stuff you came in with. And there will be 2 whole questions that are just asking you to produce knowledge. You should do these in a very specific order. The first thing you do every time, no matter who you are, no matter what, is do the math. Always, every student, no exception, flip around, find the math, do that first. There are many, many reasons for this. Probably the most clear reason is that once your brain starts searching its content for 1 or 2 specific topics in the free response questions, you'll kind of get rutted, and it's very difficult to distract yourself, switch to the other side of the brain and do the math stuff, and then come back to those topics. So, you'll start with the math first, no matter what. Show your work, don't forget your units, then move on. If you truly have no freaking clue, there's still a couple of hints. First of all, your numbers should be reasonable. They use real data. So if you get a $3 million light bulb, you were wrong, because light bulbs are about $3. So you did something wrong, and you should set up the thing, or double check your scientific or whatever. Second, if you get like long division that has like an infinite decimal, like square root of pi negative I, like nope, you did something wrong. Because you're not allowed to use a calculator, stuff works out smoothly to real square numbers. So if you really don't know what's going on, just see if there's a way to set up the numbers that gives you 2, because that might be the right answer. Really. Like if you've got some data that just doesn't make sense to you, but there's like a 7.2 and a 3.6, if all else fails, do the 7.2 over the 3.6. Once you're done with the math, then you probably want to do the rest of the math questions so you can leave that page. You don't have to answer them in order as long as they're labeled. So you can do B, then A, then D, then C, then E, as long as they're labeled. If you want to skip around pages, use normal editorial markup. Cross things off, underline the good parts, say continued next page, and then you write D continued, and you keep going. Do not try to squeeze in writing between 2 lines or on the side. Listen very carefully. Do you all know who grades these? Losers like me. Teachers like myself get hired by the College Board to go to some sweaty university on the East Coast or in Ohio or something. They eat dorm food and sleep in crappy, ratty motels and sit in uncomfortable desks like yours, 8 to 10 hours a day, grading the exact same question 5 days in a row. No. Let me give you a visual. They bring in the content on a pallet, drop it, and go, okay, everybody, good luck. You're doing question number C. Let us know if you have any questions. And there's somebody who runs the room, and everybody talks over the answers, and then they get on. By the end of Friday, when they've got like gut rot and like hemorrhoids and like a stiff neck and like they're all bleary-eyed and like the acne's killing them and they like miss their kids and they just want to go surf, and they get your stupid paper and you've got all that chicken scratch wedged between 2 lines, you think they're going to force themselves to read that? Just so you know, they're not. They give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So they go, I can't read that. Can you read that? And after they pass it to a second person, if that person can't read it, you just got a 0. And they don't put any little marks on it. That's a courtesy I give you when you see your essays. When they give it back, you'll just be like, oh, that looks perfectly good to me. They won't grade it. So think about them. Write big and show them, like, don't cram it in. Just say, crossed off, and like, I answered on the next page, actually. And just like, D-continued, and keep going.
Little arrow.
Arrows work. Bubbles, like circle the stuff and an arrow and keep going, that works. You'll want to skip around, and trust me on this. Answer the other synthesis evaluation parts. If you can remember in the order of my units, answer them in that order. So if there's something from Unit 3, and then something from Unit 5, and then something from Unit 7, skip around to answer the 3, then the 5, then the 7. Trust me on that. The very last thing you will answer, please look up, is the document-based part of the document pre-response question. This is not like some history classes where you have a format for document-based questions. That's not true. It's just a question where you have to reference writing. That's the very last part you'll answer. The last thing you'll do is the A and the B. Yeah?
Would that be like on all those, in that packet of questions you gave us back, would that be the one with the article?
Yes, that's what I mean. Are there any questions about what I've said so far about the pre-response questions? I got a lot of stuff left. Now I start to speed up, okay? You should think for a minute, then outline, then start to answer. If you think about it, 22.5 minutes to write 10 sentences is a lot of time. If you already know what you're going to write, you should be able to write 10 sentences in under 5 minutes. The problem is, if you're trying to think and write at the same time, you're trying to use very different parts of the brain. That's really inefficient. That's like walking back and forth to carry buckets to the fire instead of passing the buckets between people standing still. You all know what I'm talking about? You want your brain to be efficient. So take a minute to think about the question. Then take a minute to outline your answer. Then take the remaining minutes to write all those sentences. Don't write and think at the same time. That is not productive. Take a split second, force yourself to do this. You can watch the clock if you need to. But take like a minute, minute and a half to just outline. Oh, then I got to mention dissolved oxygen, then I got to mention bacteria, then I got to mention acidification. How much did that take me? That was like 3 seconds to say that. Take a minute and a half to outline before you start writing. Once you dive into writing, it's actually a really inefficient transition. It's like slowing down the car to put it in reverse, to slow it down to put it back in first, second, third, fourth, and then get to highway speeds. You do not want to be switching back and forth from thinking to writing. Make sure you identify the keywords. So you want to circle the keywords. You want to underline the action terms. If you're going to use a diagram, you have to label it. No fluff. Don't restate the questions. Just give them full sentence answers. It's all graded on a 10-point scale, so you should have basically 10 sentences. Full, complete sentences. Imagine you're being interrogated. No BS, no fluff, but you do want to sound smart. You want to explain everything. There are really generic answers that are always right and never right enough. Like bad for biodiversity or causes pollution. Of course that's right. Any question I ask causes pollution. But you're not showing you understand anything. You could walk up to a 5-year-old and be like, hey kid, what's wrong with coal-burning power plants? And they'd be like, oh, I don't know, causes pollution? Like, of course that's right. But it's not right enough to show you understand anything. So you want to be accurate and detailed, like the 2-year-old rule, like somebody's asking you why before you put down the pencil? Yeah.
What was that one word that you said you could use for basically anything? It was like, what is it?
Oh, ecosystem services, like the value of biodiversity, like the value of nature. That's a Swiss Army knife. When you answer with a word, just so you know, even if you're right, they usually won't give you credit. If you say the problem is ecosystem shear, that's not explaining. That's not describing. So you have to show that you understand things. Memorizing words is never enough. That's why flashcards are stupid. You do not want to answer with words. You need the concept. The good news is you don't have to memorize the words. If you can't remember the words, don't worry about it. Just explain the concept, but you must have that concept. Does somebody have a hand?
I was just going to say for ones that it says like describe, or if it says like name 2 like environmental problems or whatever and explain, and like on the answers it has like 4 points, so like 2 points for naming each one and then 2 points for explaining. So for that kind of thing, would you get a point if you just said a problem is like, if you name the problem and then...
Almost certainly, yeah.
Okay.
There's very, very little penalty for not knowing vocab. They have to make this accessible to people with different measures of literacy from all sorts of communities in the U.S. We have to give equal access to learners of language, and so like the vocab penalty is usually really, really small. The concept is usually what saves the day. Never abbreviate. Like even if you know it's BOD, don't say it BOD, biological loss of demand. Never abbreviate. Like everybody knows what the FBI is, but you'd have to say Federal Bureau of Investigation on the exam. Yeah.
If you said like biogeochemical command, the first time, can you abbreviate to BOD after?
Absolutely. You can set it in parentheses to say that, you know, like from now on BOD. Yeah. Write down what you know best first, because they'll usually only grade the first 3. So when they ask for 3 and you give them 5, they're only going to grade the first 3 anyway. And you're not marked down for being wrong, but you are marked down for contradicting yourself. So if you said it's good for biodiversity, it's bad for biodiversity. One of those has to be right. No, because if you contradict yourself, you're not going to get credit. There's no easy cheat shots like that. Practice your math. Show your work on graphs. Circle the title and the axis. No bullets, no abbreviations. They are likely to ask you about issues that have been in environmental news the last couple of years. Like, for example, carbon economics and carbon tax, that kind of stuff. They're likely to ask you about restoration projects. You know, they probably won't ask you about the Keystone Pipeline by name, but I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen soon that they talk about that, like, lower grade petroleum, like coal tar and oil sands, that kind of stuff. They did ask about fracking last year, and I predicted that one. They may talk about alternative energy. I think solar thermal has become pretty globally understood by now, that thing where you project the light to heat something up. E-waste might be in there, incineration might be in there, preventing runoff is likely to show up. Fish farming and seafood could be on there this year. Deep water petroleum or Arctic petroleum, like difficult to get petroleum, could be on there this year. I think coal ash is a growing topic. You may want to Google about that. I wonder if they're not going to ask about some nuclear stuff this year. So many people have talked about Fukushima in the last couple of years that it kind of makes sense that sooner or later they're going to ask about nuclear reactors again. Extreme weather events they might ask you about. Okay, these are my last 10 minutes. How many of you are not finding this helpful and would rather focus on other things? How many of you are finding this helpful? You want me to continue through it? Your calculations should be reasonable and your prices should be logical. If you have time, include examples. Always guess. You should never turn in a single blank bubble. Every student here must bubble 100 bubbles in the bubble section. No matter what. There's no excuse for turning in 97 of them. That's stupid. 3 times over. Here's an interesting fact you may not know. Every question on the AP test has been checked to ensure that it shows up somewhere in every textbook. Even if it's just 1 or 2 sentences, it has to appear in all the approved textbooks. There are now 6 approved textbooks for APES. They can't put a question in there if it didn't show up in all 6 of those books. So if you've got something that you read on Facebook about this new cutting edge something or other, but it contradicts your book, you'll probably just stick with your book. You know, your book's a few years old. It's possible to assume that the new editions have additional content. But if you've got something that you remember from the book vaguely, and that's all you remember, just go with that. Because they're not allowed to use a question that doesn't appear in the book somewhere.
Approved in each one of the 6 books?
In all 6 of the approved books. Length does not equal points. You should basically have a single, solid sentence for each of the 10 points in each of the free response questions. A perfect exam is 40 sentences. Yeah. No, but that's why they're not going to ask you about a named issue. Like, they won't ask you about the Kulloch oil rig either, or the Deepwater Horizon. But they might ask you about the challenges of extreme petroleum extraction, which was in the book, or about lower grade petroleum, which was in the book. Yeah?
Do you know what your average score is for among your students?
The most common grade among students in my sections is a 4. 70 to 75% of my students pass the AP test. Sorry, 70 to 75% of the students who take the test pass it. Of the test takers, pass it.
So you have like how many classes?
What?
You have like 5 classes, right?
6.
There's 6.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's about 180 people. So of those, about 80-odd% take the test. We have about 20 to 30 people every year who don't take it. And of the ones who take it, about 70 to 75% pass. The ones who don't take it, I don't know how they would do. There's a lot of kids that like going to fancy Ivy League school, so they don't need the AP test. And a lot of the kids are like, whoa, this class has been really early for me. I'm not going to mess with the AP test. Always include units. If the question is how many dwarves were in Snow White, the answer is not 7.
7 dwarves.
The answer is 7 dwarves. Don't forget to include the units. So I would like to finish. I am going right to the bell. If you could just bear with me for another like 7 minutes now. There are often a lot of points at the end of a free response question. So if you're truly out of time, you probably want to answer E, the last part of the free response question. When you talk about cost and benefit, make sure that you're clear about which type of cost and benefit. You should say that in writing. One environmental benefit of nuclear power is so-and-so, while one environmental cost of fish farming is so-and-so. Make sure that you specify the type of cost benefit. You put away your phone now, please. Never list anything. Explain it. Remember that both the data math question and the document question are about half credit for what you knew without reading the data and without reading the document. So if you don't have time for the document, answer the last parts. If you suck at the math, still answer the last parts because they're irrelevant. There are never any half points. If you haven't said something in your sentence, you've just been wasting your time. Every sentence will either get a point or it won't. If you're like, oh, I don't know, this might be right, just quit wasting your time. Say things that matter. Answer each question. This is like an interrogation. Nobody wants a conversation with you. They just want you to get to the facts. I mean, I want a conversation with you, but after Monday morning. Be really careful about similar options. You know, if they ask you, like, what are 2 things you can do at home to save water? Marlon, do that later. If they ask you, what are 2 things you can do at home to save water? Don't say an efficient washing machine and an efficient dishwasher. Because their key might say efficient appliance, and you've given them 2 of the same bubble. Does that make sense? Beware similarity. Anybody ever do that in my class? Where you said shower head and faucet or something? Might be very careful, because if you just give them similar things, that might just be one part of their key. You should practice all the math questions. You should find the 5 or 6 experimental design questions and use my experimental design page. It's very likely they will ask an experimental design question this year. Very likely. I gave you a page in the main review packet that's how to design an experiment. Just go through it once. Look at your questions and try that. You got a bunch of hours to study this weekend. Spend a little bit on experimental design. Remember not to try to make your answers green. This isn't about getting a job for Greenpeace. If they ask you about nuclear power and all you know is that nuclear power might be good, just say that. For a lot of issues, students are afraid to be a proponent of something which hippies don't like. But there are good things about nuclear power. There are logical reasons to use pesticides. GMOs have distinct benefits. I tried to present those this year. Even if you don't want them for our society, you still have to consider that side. They will almost certainly ask you at least a couple of points on something which is not the hippie platform. Last thing I want to remind you. You have seen pass before your eyes a tremendous volume of content. You are probably more prepared for this exam than, in my opinion, 90% of students who will take it next Monday. Statistically, as an average, about 10% of American schools do better than my sections. And at least 80-85% of American sections do worse. You've got it. So when you walk in there, don't think you're going to know all of it, but remember, you can do really well with what you've got. Focus your energy, stay calm, don't lose your head game. People who free dive, people who rock climb, you know what I'm talking about. When your head gets scrambled, it's over. So just stay cool, stay calm. If there's a few you don't know, that's all right. You're not supposed to know it all. Just do your best on what you've got. On those free response questions, be focused, always explain. No vague answers. Depth of understanding. Get a nice eraser. Clear plastic water bottle. Big ballpoints. Sleep a lot. Marlon turning your extra credit.